Hey, welcome to the Relentless Positivity Podcast. I'm your host, Joe Martin, and my guest today is Di Emanuel. So he's a super dad. He's out dating his wife. He's the lead big by example kind of guy. That's the kind of guy you want in your life, right? And listen to his mission. That's why he is perfect for this show right now. So he wants to positively impact 1 million role models around the globe to lead a functionally fit life through education, encouragement, and community. Di, thanks for being on, man. That's amazing.
Joe, thank you, man. It's like, after listening to a few of your episodes, but also just checking out your platform, like, dude, we're from the same cloth. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Like,
Yeah.
like it's my brother from another mother, and it's just, but it's awesome, right? Like, it's. We were talking before we hit record today. This that just those opportunities to get around more people that you share similar interests, but also share a similar energy with.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
just
So
how quickly that can change everything for us. When you get around somebody that wants something similar to what you're wanting or doing similar things that what you're doing, that power of duplication and then amplification, especially when you get around a community of people like that, it's like, hello, what can't I do, right?
right. Hey, if you guys can feel it right now, Di can change the room. Can y'all feel that? How the room kind of changes, wherever you are, that's what he does. So, hey, what do you say we positively impact some people right now? What do you say?
All right, yeah, let's
All
do
right,
it.
let's go. So let's bring it back. So you may be able to hear his accent a little bit. So where did you grow up? What kind
Yeah.
of kid were you growing up?
What are you talking about? No, I'm just doing. Yeah, no, I grew up in Eastern on Canada, but Eastern Ontario specifically. So if people are aware of Toronto, it's Ontario is that state that's north of New York State, right? And well, to be honest, I grew up just outside of Toronto, and or Toronto, and um, but I was far enough removed that we were in a small, more rural community. So I grew up in a small town sort of feel. Like just as an example, our entire high school had a population of 1,200 kids, which I know isn't small, but it's not huge. Like when you look at some of these massive schools, like now when my kids are going to school here in Vancouver, they had over 3,000 kids at that school,
Oh
right?
wow,
So it's a big difference number wise, and my graduating class, I knew everybody by name, right? Like that just to put this in perspective. So that was sort of how I grew up, and then when I turned 18, though, I was peace out. I'm moving west, go west, young man, and I did. I moved to Vancouver and never looked back because I'm one. I don't like the cold, so and people are probably like, well, why are you in Canada? But Vancouver is like Seattle climate wise. So,
okay,
most of the time you don't get snow in the winter. It's rainy, but you typically don't get, snow. I can drive to Whistler if I want the snow. I got the choice now. And, but also it's the outdoors. I love the outdoors, love hiking, love walking, running, cycling, anything I can do outside, I love. So,
amazing,
lifestyle wise, it made better sense to come here. But also, I wanted to leave behind all the old beliefs people had about who I was.
man.
I mean,
Yeah,
there's something about reinventing ourselves and really just going to a place where nobody knows us. That excited me, and that was another motivation. So yeah, those are a few things. But yeah, I'm in Vancouver now, and but I grew up in Ontario.
that's a great point. You can be kind of pigeonholed by people that have known you your whole life. Like, oh, that's
Yeah,
just that. That's what he does.
yeah.
So, man, was that the version of like the American version of going from New York to California? Is that the Canadian version?
Yes, yes,
Okay.
yes. With the exception, I grew up in a small town, so I think it would be like living in upper state New York in one of those smaller communities, and then moving out to like LA, right? Like I'm
Yeah.
just trying to create that juxtaposition. I went from small town life to the big city of Vancouver, which isn't a very big city, by the way, but it was big enough, and it was bigger than what I was used to. But yeah, definitely that you know, uh, it was something that I knew I always wanted to do.
Yeah.
And especially as I went through a big change in my teen years, I was morbidly obese as a teenager. So I didn't come from health and fitness. I actually came from the other end of the spectrum. But after I went through those changes, it took me like 6 years to get to my largest, like a BMI well in the 40s. And it took me about 6 years to get to that size, to that state of unhealth. But when I made a change and made a decision to get healthy, it took me 20 months to release all that weight and to get to a new place where I felt better about who I was and more confident about where I was going, which allowed me to confidently say, yeah, I'm going to sever all my ties here. I'm moving out west, and I'm just going to lean into that person I've always wanted to be and be that. And so I don't know who doesn't get excited about that kind of an idea, because it's almost a cliche now. We hear about that so frequently, right? But I loved it, man. It was just a great opportunity.
Oh yeah. So what was the turning point? So you're an overweight teen and you
Mm.
decide one day, hey, this I've had enough. What was the turning point?
Pretty much. Well, we hear the cliche, oh man, I hit rock bottom, right? But I was really creative as a kid. I was like, rock bottom? What's under the rock? Well, let me find out. So we're like, lift that rock up. Oh, look, I got a little escape hatch. I can go even deeper, and my despair and my wallowing in my self-pity. But to be fair, and most of us as kids, we've had something fairly traumatic that might have happened that creates just a big change in our lives. And often the change, it's not like we say, hey, life, give me some big changes, please. I want change. Right? I mean, whoever wakes up and says that, I don't know, so it was my first experience of feeling like I was a victim of change and I was powerless to it, and that was at age 9.
Oh,
right.
wow.
My parents dropped the bomb on my brother and I. We're separating and getting a divorce. And I'm totally going to date myself. So I'm going to be 47 in a few months. So I'm 46 right now. This is going back, right? You go think about it, going back to when I'm 9. This is a long time ago. All right. This is like 1985, people. And in the 80s, we didn't have the internet like we have today. But also, if people remember or they do some research, you'll realize that there was also a lot of stigmatization around divorce. And so, where do I turn as a 9-year-old? Where do I find resources? Where do I find support? Who do I talk to? Because my parents were busy enough in their own stuff.
Right.
They were navigating, this trying to untangle and figure out how's life going to move forward. Now we got these 2 kids that we have to think about, plus their careers and everything else. Right. So I get it. I understand now. Back then I had no idea, but now, as a father of 2 girls that are, 18 and 20, I now have a lot more empathy and sympathy for what my parents were doing.
Sure.
But, I was at that 9-year-old place, didn't have anybody to talk to or people to just vent and open up about what was going on internally. So I bottled it all up, but I wanted to feel better. I wanted to feel like I had some control in something for my own life. And I found out really quickly, wow, if I eat certain types of foods and I do certain types of activities like playing video games or watching movies, wow, I feel better in that moment. Life doesn't feel so daunting. I'm okay. And actually, when you learn about neurotransmitter and how certain things influence how we feel very quickly, chemically speaking, those activities became reinforced because instantly they make me feel better in the moment. But that's fleeting, as anybody will tell you. It's not like I was sitting around Joe saying, hey, Joe, pass me some more salad, please. It was like, no, I was eating food that was really dense in calories, yet very poor in nutrition value. And so in essence, I was like starving myself, of a lot of vitamins, minerals, and micronutrients. I wasn't getting any of that stuff. So I was always hungry, wanting to eat more. And again, and I know anybody that's put on a lot of weight in their life or might be in that state of unhealth, it doesn't happen overnight. It's a compound effect of time. And at 15, I just got to a place where I didn't want to keep having those ideations of what life would be like if I didn't wake up in the morning.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
That scared me. I didn't like that. I never acted on it, but it was a present thought and it was always there because that seemed easy. That would be the easiest way to just stop how I'm feeling about myself. And, it got to a place where I just realized if change is going to happen, it's got to be me that makes it happen, but I don't have to do it alone. And so when that flip of the switch happened, I remember going to my dad and my mom and saying, listen, I want to get healthy. And I was 15 years old and they both looked at me and they're like, really? Okay. What can we do to help? Because at that point in time, my family was always coming to me saying, hey, why don't you try this? Or how about you do this? Because as parents, we want to see our kids happy.
Sure.
And we will just constantly give them ideas and we're trying to support them. But every time they came to me offering up a piece of advice, I just thought, and this is what I heard, I'm not enough. You don't like me as I am. You think I need to change. And again, I already had a really bad relationship with change because I remember the last time I had a big change, it was something that I didn't want. My parents got divorced. So I'm like, change is bad. Food is good. Video games good. Movies good. And long and short, I made that decision, got a mountain bike, started moving my body every day. I then went and educated myself on nutrition. Went to the library, got books out. My kids are still like, Dad, why don't you just Google it? I'm like, hey, I'm older than Google, older than Google, and a bunch of smart asses. Anyways, and then that was it, right? Like that was sort of how things started. And it took 20 months of consistency and frequency and constantly reinforcing some of these new good habits and patterns and recognizing, wow, these make me feel just like when I would have a big bowl of ice cream. But I don't crash after this. I don't crash after a nice workout. I might feel fatigued and whatnot, but if I eat a healthy meal after, I feel great. I feel way better than I did before I did the workout. I'm like, ooh, this is good. So it's reaffirming these new actions do provide the positive effect, and then just committing to that lifestyle. And that's was such a valuable lesson for me to learn early on in life, because I've seen that repeated actually a number of times, up to now where I'm 46, and it's still happening today, right? But my relationship with change is much more understanding and sympathetic and empathetic, but also I recognize that I have the power to change whenever I decide to,
Wow, you get the power back. That's amazing right there.
Yeah.
So let me ask you, so
yeah.
I know some of the best trainers that I've ever met have a similar story, that they too were overweight,
Right.
out of shape, and they know how that feels. How has that helped you on your journey to help so many people get through the same stuff you've gone through?
Well, empathy is a powerful emotion. I really feel if everybody was more empathetic, the world would be very different. It just would. Unfortunately, narcissism is alive and real. And, I look at some of the global leaders, Putin, I don't think there's a lot of empathy there. Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, we see this repeat itself quite frequently. Right. But long and short of it, that empathy has allowed me to better understand and connect with people, but also from the standpoint that I know what it's like. I know what it's like to wake up in the morning and everything hurts. And that first action that you do in the morning feels hard, like just even tying my shoes,
Yeah.
or I remember back then, in the high school, my home room was on the 3rd floor. So my first thing I'd have to do, get into school, is walk up 3 flights of stairs. And I remember having a little bit of a sweat on my brow, being huffing and puffing. Like, that was real, man. Like that's just where I was. And I got there because I allowed myself to get there, and so now having that perspective and that experience allows me to better understand where people are at, but more importantly, help them plot a realistic path to get to where the next stop along that journey that they themselves have said they want to embark on. And I'm not planning the final end destination, because we never really know what that is, but we can start to plot milestone goals. And that's where I think I've really been able to support people, is because I see in them that potential, and able to tease out of them at least a plan to help them realize that themselves. And so that's definitely what I've learned through that ability of just being able to reframe and better understand my own journey,
Yeah, for sure. And if you've walked in those shoes, it helps I think it helps on the other side, on the client side as well, that, well, maybe he won't judge me as much as that last guy did, or something
That's
like
right.
that. So they've seen that. I have a similar story as well. And I've been able to help so many people because I don't know exactly what you're going, but here's what I went through, and I can help you get there. I've got the roadmap. Just let's walk through this together. Let's walk through it together. So that's great that you're out there doing that. So let's switch it up a little bit. So first of all, tell people what your nickname is and how you got your nickname.
Yeah, well, a little context to this. So I've been someone was always a bit of a gym goer since I made that change. At 17, obviously I lost all that weight, but then I wanted to start putting good weight on, like muscle mass. So I discovered the gym. I discovered weight training, and I really liked it. And because I already had the ability to put weight on, whenever I've lifted weights and eat well and train well, I put mass on really easily, which is, it can work in either direction. Not always a great thing, right? My body's very good at packing on the lbs, but when I'm doing it intentionally with specific types of training, I can put on some really good weight. And all that being said, I have this understanding of sort of how my body moves, right? And what it likes and what it doesn't like. And I think that's a thing that most of us want, is to have that better understanding. You mentioned like the roadmap or the blueprint, right? Well, how many of us actually have a blueprint for our own lives? Like, very few, right? I mean, we're just in the motion of day after day. And I get that because I've lived in that space for a lot. long and short of this, I got into selling fitness equipment early on in my life, in my early 20s, because I realized as a personal trainer, it's really hard to start a family. It's really hard to be successful unless you're willing to compromise lifestyle. It's just the way it is. You know, the most successful trainers out there, yeah, they might be serving, let's just say 30 to 35 clients a week. And if that's an hour per client, it's not like you're punching in for 35 hours, you know, like 8 hours a day. It's like a couple sessions in the morning, session at noon, maybe, and maybe a few sessions after 5 o'clock. So your day might be a 14-hour day to bill for 6 hours.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So it's hard. It's hard. And so I got into equipment sales, fitness equipment sales. And I was like, whoa, this is kind of cool. And they were like, yeah, it's performance-based pay. And I'm like, well, what does that mean? And when they explained it to me, I was like, okay, wait, let me get this right. You know, they're explaining commission and how all that works. I was like, you're basically telling me the more people I can help get healthy and really help them find the right products to help them get the results that they themselves want, you'll pay me more? They're like, yes. And I'm like, I'm in. and I applied myself. You know, I really wanted to learn everything I could about customer service and sales and really just how to create value for people. And I excelled very quickly. And what happened was a few years into that, all of a sudden, this thing called CrossFit popped up. And I mean, I only knew about it because I read an article on Men's Health that was interviewing the trainer that was training the guys for the movie 300. If anybody remembers the old 300 movie, Gerard Butler and all those guys, they're jacked, right? Like they're like, these are Spartan warriors. And when I was reading that article, they talked about CrossFit principles. And this is the first time I'd ever heard of it. Funny enough, within that, very short period of time, the guy that opened up the first CrossFit gym in Canada came walking into one of our stores and bought some equipment for his gym. And as part of the discount we gave him, he said, hey, if you want to come down and try it, come down anytime. I put it off for 6 months. I just wasn't willing to do it. And then eventually more and more started coming up about this. And I'm like, why am I so against this? Why am I think that I know it all and I'm already good enough with doing what I'm already doing? I already go to the gym. I know how to work out. I know how to exercise. Like it's just another group fitness thing. I don't think I'm not into that. Anyways, I eventually showed up. And the way that they typically would operate back in the day was they would do some sort of baseline testing on your first session. Basically just trying to find out where you're at, but also allow you to figure out where you're at and how. Right. And for me, it was really humbling because I realized, man, I'm not as far as I thought I was, in my journey as far as fitness and health and performance was concerned. And I got spanked, absolutely spanked that very first workout. And my ego was like, hell no, I'm coming back tomorrow. I'm going to do this again because that can't be how I end this, experience with CrossFit is on this negative of me just doubting myself and feeling like, wow, I just got schooled. So I went back. Within about a week, the guy that owned it and the guy that was coaching me at the time, Patty, he's like, he watched me run. I'm not very graceful. Okay, Joe. No one's taught me how to run. I'm not a graceful runner. I make a lot of noise. I huff and I puff. Okay. Like there's just, I'm heavy footed. Okay. It's just them. I'm like, it's just the way it is. And he started calling me Moose because I run like a moose. But also because of the old Archie Jughead comics, remember Moose in that has got a fairly defined jawline. And so between the jawline, how I run and kind of the oafishness of myself, as far as when it came to physical fitness, Coach Moose emerged and it just sort of stuck, and when I started blogging and coming online for many, many years, about a decade, I always was referring to myself as Coach Moose. So the name is stuck. Some people still refer to me as that. And even the CrossFit gym that I occasionally will cover classes for some of the crew when they're unable, just because I love doing that stuff still. It's not my career, but I sure do enjoy it. And all that community still refers to me as Coach Moose. So it's kind of fun. But that's how all that came about.
That's a good nickname, man. There's much worse ones out there. So that's a good one, right?
Yeah, right. There sure is.
So, man, I love your 5F approach to living. So let's start off. First of all, what are those 5Fs? We'll start there.
Well, hey, listen, all of us have certain values, right? Like if we were to ask everybody listening or watching this right now, it's like, hey, what are your primary values? I mean, those values that you're not willing to ever negotiate around, they're non-negotiables. Like they are set. Because there's something that's really powerful when you get really clear on what are your primary values, the things that you're not willing to ever sacrifice. It can become very good beacons, if you will, to provide us direction, you know? And for me, when I really got clear on what those were for me, and also because I was writing a book at the time, and alliteration helps people remember stuff. And so, of course, I came up with 5Fs to sort of represent those values. And what they are is fitness, faith, family, finances, and an overarching roof of fun. Okay. And those 5Fs, when it really boils down to it, I mean, those are all encompassing, and sure, they can be catch-alls. You know, when I say finances, what does that mean? Well, the way I make money, the way I invest money, but also the way I share money, right? It can encompass just my belief systems around finances. Family, same thing. That could be not only just immediate family, it could be indirect family or community, right? But I found that they were words that really encompassed that. And as I aligned my life to prioritize those values, I've noticed that the resistance around change, the resistance to be resilient, all that started to fall away. Not that it's not still there, okay? Full disclosure, it's still there. But my ability to get through it or avoid it at times just became much more real and present. And that's what I mean. It's sort of this clarifying thing, because I think a lot of us struggle with the gray zone in life. You know what I mean? Like there's that yes and there's that no, very clear answers. They are their own sentences. Yes, period. But then there's this thing in the middle, which is the large part, which is the maybe, right? And or the what if. And we spend a lot of time in that place.
Right.
When you get clear on your values, it helps you cut through the gray area to get to a decision quicker. As an example, you know, I speak quite frequently. So I do a lot of keynoting and speaking and like brand appearances, that kind of stuff. I love it. I love connecting with audiences and connecting with people, right? I like telling a good story, right? So it's cool. I love it. But sometimes the scheduling can conflict with my family commitments. I'm not willing to negotiate on those because that's a primary. That's the main thing that I'm always working to really protect and solidify. So if there's something that's going to take me away from my family, and especially during a very milestone moment or an event, my answer is no. You know, just really easy. It's not like, oh, maybe we can switch things. It's like, no, it's a no for this. And here's why, if you need to know the reason, you know, and so it's been very freeing for me. You know, because does anybody ever feel like, geez, I just, you know, you feel like you just don't have control of your schedule, right? Like it's just like, and also FOMO plays into it, right? The fear of missing out. So we say yes, probably a lot more. We overcommit. We don't have enough time to do the things that we've committed to, which starts to create a negative feeling, negative perspective on ourselves, which in itself creates a need to procrastinate. Let's avoid all that stuff and just do something else to distract ourselves right now, because we don't want to admit that I feel like I'm failing. You know, I'm not following through what I said I would do. I'm not feeling very integral with my life right now. And sometimes we do other things. For me, it was also alcohol. For a big part of my life, alcohol was the way I would distract myself from those negative feelings about myself. You know, it's all good. I'll just have that. I'll have a couple drinks right now. I'll chill. I'll relax. I'll worry about that stuff tomorrow. And then, you know, tomorrow, same thing happens, right? So I became very good at collecting tomorrows, you know, and eventually you wake up one day, you empty your pockets with all these tomorrows that you think you've collected, and you realize, oh, they're just a bunch of wasted yesterdays, right? So it's like, and that's where I was, you know, so making those changes really helped when I got clear on what those primary values are. And so I invite everybody, maybe the 5S aren't yours, that's fine. Figure out what yours are though, you know? And there's lots of great exercises. Brene Brown's got a wonderful book that talks about this quite a bit. And even if you just watch some of her TED Talks, you know, she talks about vulnerability, but she also talks about different ways of getting honest with oneself, you know, more in the professional vein, not as much in the personal vein, but I find the two are very synergistic. So, you know, anyways, that's what I would recommend everybody do. You know?
Yeah. I mean, you can lie to everybody else, but you can't be lying to yourself. You can't do that.
Yeah. Well said.
so I like that you tie it all together with fun. So why was fun such an important part of you having your lifestyle like that?
Listen, Joe, if you can't smile at least once every day, there's room for improvement. All right. So the fun aspect is just that sense of joy that we get. and happiness that we get when we're doing things that make us feel fulfilled. You know what I mean? Like that idea of fulfillment, that like I've got, like everything I've got is enough. And I'm doing the things, and I'm filling my days with the things that I want to fill it with, the people I want to fill it with, the experiences I want to fill it with. And it creates this space to experience more joy and happiness, which inevitably the byproduct of that is you're going to have more fun. You're going to smile more. Okay. So, and also you navigate the challenges a little bit more, let's just say constructively. Maybe not with that negative, like, oh gosh, I got to work through this. Oh, this is going to be awful. It's like, yeah, it's okay. It's a chapter. I got to get through this chapter, and then I'll write a new chapter, and it's like, it's just shifting our relationship with how we look at things, that worldview or that world perspective, as well as the self perspective. And that's what we can see change. I mean, you as a coach, this very well with your teams, right? Like you might get a brand new player to a team, or a whole crew of them brand new when those first years come in, right? And it's like, there's a certain belief system that they might have, not only about themselves, about the team, but it's your role as their coach, their mentor, the person that's not only inviting them in, but to guide them, right? And you are very good at doing that because you've already done it for yourself. And I think that's why I often refer to coaches as mentors, especially people like yourself, Joe, because it's not just coaching. You are bringing a lot of yourself to what you coach. And that really elevates it to the level of mentorship, because you're like, hey, I've been there. I've done that. Whew, I got the t-shirt to show, but here you go. And by sharing that is an act of vulnerability, which I think is extremely powerful, but it's not something that we're all very comfortable with. And I can definitely speak to that because it's not something that I grew up with. Vulnerability. I mean, talk about how I'm feeling. Forget that, that was what was modeled by the men in my life. So of course I wouldn't expect anything different until, you feel that need to change, or you want to connect, or you want to help other people. You realize vulnerability's got to be part of the equation.
Yeah, for sure.
It's got to be, but how do we practice that? How do we learn that skill and develop it in a way that we feel safe, right? That's where the conundrum is. That's where the challenge is. Otherwise, we'd all be walking around thinking, yeah, I'll be vulnerable anytime, anywhere, but no, that's not the case,
Yeah, it's tough. Like, I mean, that's not really how most of us grew up, but I've noticed, as we talked earlier, I've got a teenage son. He plays sports, and I found we connect much deeper when I talk about my struggles rather than when I talk about how good I was back in the day. They can connect with that, right? Rather than not just being this, oh yeah, I was awesome back then. You should have seen me. That's great and all, but when you share their struggles, that's when they lean in a little bit and catch your lessons. So if you're listening right now and you're like me, that's how I started off I started off telling him how good I was. And I was like, well, he don't need to hear all that. He needs to hear all the struggles, right? To realize, we're all human. And he went through this too. Then I think I'll get through this situation as well.
Well said. And Joe, that's the perfect example of this practice, in motion. And but it's not easy, right? And I'm sure, the first few times when you're opening up about some of those stories, especially if there's stories that you haven't told before or very infrequently, it's an emotional conversation, right? And emotions, we are not humans being emotional. We are emotional humans, right? Yeah. Like we are sentient beings. We have this thing called emotion. So don't try to avoid it. As much as you believe in stoicism and I want to be stoic, I want to be the sage, and just be even keel. Forget about it, man. You're going against your programming. Okay. Like the defaults are there, but it doesn't mean we have to let the defaults rule us. Right. We can learn to navigate it in a more effective and powerful way. And that's where developing a skill around vulnerability became really good. But just full disclosure, people are listening to this, there might be some people like shaking their head like, no way, man. No. I think vulnerability is a weakness. You don't ever show your weakness. And I get it. I can appreciate that position. But what I have to ask you is, can you see areas in your life where vulnerability did help you? Because there is moments where it's clearly helped people. I'm like, hey, if you've gotten a date and more importantly, got a second date with that same person, you got really good at vulnerable. Okay. Like you had to be vulnerable to even go out with somebody, to ask them to go out. And who knows, maybe that's where you got your life partner. Right. And so it is a skill, and it's a skill that can serve us really well, but not everyone is deserving of our vulnerability. It has to be earned.
Right.
because it's huge for developing trust. And if you lose trust, good luck ever getting it back.
Oh man,
Good luck.
that's a big one. That's a big one right there.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. It's
you got
huge.
this life framework and it's work, but what's kind of the glue that holds it all together for you?
Well, that's a really good question, Joe. Really good question. Times it feels like paper mache. I gotta be honest with you. Well, and what I mean by that is just like with every stage of life, there seems to be a new set of problems, right? Or challenges. And there's been periods of my life where I'm like, gosh, again, like I'll be honest, man. Like you deal with one a struggle, like we're moving again, right? And I'm like, man, we've been in this place 12 years. We subletted it out when we were traveling. Like it's just this has been home. Our kids grew up here, and it's easy to just want to stay put, right? But I've recognized that change is good. And with change often comes new opportunities, new connections, new experiences, new lessons, new opportunities to grow or put into practice the things that we do feel very, I don't know what the best way to say this, but the things that we feel like we're good at. Like I've realized that usually when big change happens, it gives me an opportunity to get into a place where I don't feel very comfortable. But often when I get comfortable, I'm often in a better position than I was before the change happened. And I think that's the nature of change. When we're going through it, it sucks. It is like it does. It's not easy. It's not like we signed up saying, "Oh, yeah, more please." But most often we get through the change, and then we have an opportunity to turn around and look at what we just went through. And very rarely does it ever feel as bad as it was when we were in it.
Right. That's absolutely, especially with moving. So you're going through moving right now. It's terrible. It's terrible. But then for me,
plus we're downsizing, so I'm trying to figure out what stuff do we get rid of, right? And it's like, I don't want to get rid of any of my stuff. No, it's tough. I got all this fitness gear, right? And I'm like, well, my wife's like, no, we can't take all your fitness gear. There's just no way. And I'm like, well, what am I not going to take? I can't not take that. Like I got these hurdles and all sorts of. Anyways, it's. If we were neighbors, Joe, I'd just be like, Joe, come pick it up. You can use this for the kids.
You'd be the greatest neighbor ever. Oh, I would love that. Yeah. So I'm the same way. They're like your children. How can I leave these?
Yeah.
I need my kettlebells and hurdles. And
I'm like, yeah. I'm like, I'm taking my power blocks and my bench, no matter what. They're coming with me, But everything else is up for discussion. But sorry, I didn't mean to sort of circumvent the question, but just put it to bed. I think it's just that relationship with change is the biggest factor that plays into everything we're talking about today. If we're very change averse, we're going to have a lot of struggles in life. And I just mean because change happens no matter what.
Right.
Buddha, like 2,500 years ago, 2,600 years ago, is like, hey, you know what? This whole thing called the universe, it's impermanent. It's always changing. And, science in the last 100 years has said, hey, you know what Buddha said? He's actually right. The world this entire universe as we understand it's in a constant state of change. And the law of entropy, right? Energy is just changing forms, but it's always changing. Well, so is our lives, right? So either learn how to roll with it, or you're going to have a really challenging time, because every time you run up against change, there's going to be this fear response or flight and flight or flee, right? To want to turn around and run tail. Like I get it, but I don't want to live my life like that, So as hard as the challenge is, and as hard and challenging as the change is, just going to go at it, and try to have a positive perspective as I'm going through it. And trust me, it's not always been easy. I'm dealing with a 15-year struggle with alcohol, being diagnosed with a chronic autoimmune condition. Like I've had some pretty big milestone moments where it's like, whoa, wasn't easy, but I'll tell you, it was worth it.
Right. Yeah, and you've referenced your relationship with alcohol a couple of times. So share with everybody kind of that one question that changed everything.
Well, yeah, and I won't steal the thunder of my TEDx talk, because hopefully people want to go watch that. But it sort of picks up at this place I was in my early 30s, where I was. We talked about the rock before, and I was definitely digging a hole under the rock, and it was just me. Just doing what I was doing and not willing to admit that maybe it's a good idea to change. Maybe this sadness, this depression and anxiety I'm experiencing is being more creative based on how I'm acting or not acting, and really just taking full accountability for my own actions. And because it was a lot easier just to as challenging as life got, it was always easy to uncork a bottle. Like that was way easier. Um, but I realized it never made anything better. It just delayed things, or my admittance to things being challenging or hard. And it just became a real habit. It was just part of my lifestyle. It was a distraction, a tool to escape. And I would always justify it, and I had good reason for it, because I spend all day supporting our family, and I'm working with people. I got this company I've co-founded, and so much stress, and it's just, life's hard. So yeah, I deserve this drink at the end of the day, or a bottle or two,
Yeah.
and it got to a place, my wife and I were together for a decade at that point. Both of our daughters were under the age of 6. And yeah, things were slowly unraveling, like I'd done some things I'm not proud of. There's some promiscuity, wasn't faithful to my wife. On top of that, I'd made some bad business decisions. I also, just wasn't super respectful at times, especially when I was drinking. I was always considered fun guy the guy that you'd want around if you were partying. But at times I could rub people the wrong way. And I get that. I totally understand it, because I've had it happen to me too when I've been out with people that have had too much to drink. And unfortunately I'd remember it the next morning. I'd be like, oh man, I feel like an ass, for doing all that. And yet that still wasn't enough to instigate a change. I continued to do what I was doing. Well, that fateful morning, this is going back 14 years now, my wife sat me down and she's like, hey, I'm not okay with our girls growing up in this environment anymore. And let's talk about how we're going to co-parent our kids, and you're going to have to find somewhere else to live. And, that's not what I wanted. Remember, one of my values is family. The whole reason why I was working and doing what I was doing, I believed, was to support my family, but really it was for my ego. I recognize that now, but I could justify as family, but it was really all about me. And she asked me a question during this very emotional conversation. We're both shedding tears. We're really getting to the nut of it. And she says, Di, are you being the type of man that you would want to marry your daughters?
Oh, wow.
Exactly. Wow. It was, Joe, it was, and I know it's a pun, but it was a very sobering question, like literally and metaphorically speaking. Like, it was just, wow. And in that moment, I realized everything that I was modeling and how I was mentoring those that were closest to me was actually in complete juxtaposition from what I was prioritizing as far as values. And honestly, who I believed I was always becoming. We always have an idea growing up of what we stand for and how we want to be perceived. But when you get really clear on it and you start to look from the outside and looking in at yourself, you start to realize, man, the things I'm doing are actually contradictory to everything that I've been saying and wanting to do. And that's a tough place to come to and realize that you're there, because it's like, whoa, now what? And for me, that now what was like, what? I've got to say no to alcohol so I can say yes to the life I've wanted. And it started with just a 1-year commitment to not drink. Like literally, it was like 1 year. I made a commitment to myself right then and there with my wife and my 2 daughters. I'm like, I'm going to go 1 year and not have any alcohol. And for me, at that point in time, like I told you, it was 15 years I was struggling with this. The longest I'd ever done is like a sober January. So this is a 12x improvement. I'm thinking that's a pretty big deal, So, but again, I wasn't like I'm quitting alcohol. I never felt like I was an alcoholic, because I do understand there's people that will identify with that term. I didn't, because I never felt powerless to it. I was always fully aware of my decisions, and I would choose to have another drink. I never was in a place where I felt like powerless against it, that it was like automatic, that I couldn't stop myself. I was choosing to. I was prioritizing and valuing alcohol over everything else in my life. And so when I removed that, man, within the first couple months, I realized how hard it was going to be to make some changes, because I didn't know how. And that's when I really experienced the first time in my life being vulnerable. Started with my wife, just opening up and saying, this is everything I'm feeling right now. This is why I want the alcohol. Here's really what's going on. And I remember my wife listening to me go off and just sort of dump this on her, right? Like verbal diarrhea, just blah, 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 you know. And she looks at me and she says, "Thank you. It's going to be okay. And I think you should talk to somebody." You know. So and she was right. I needed somebody to talk to. And that's when I found a great psychiatrist, worked with him for 4.5 months, found another counselor that helped us with communication in our relationship, worked with them for about 3 months. And like, I went all in on that, you know, because it was important to me to get through this, but to navigate it in a good way. So it wasn't going to be a problem after the year, you know, because here it was, this is a year. I got a year. I'm not drinking. I'm prioritizing this. Everything changed. Like, Joe, everything changed. And, you know, within that year, we got to the end of it. My wife's looking at me. She's like, "Holy, you did a year." And I was like, "Holy, I did a year." You know, I was like, "Wow, this is a big deal." And she's like, "Well, do you want to celebrate? We can share some Chardonnay and watch sunset tonight on the back porch." And I'm like, "That sounds really good." But Christy, so much has changed and so many things have gotten better in this last year, not only in our relationship and our connection with our kids and our communities, like just everything's gotten so much better. What do you think would happen if I just kept going? And that what if was so enticing to me that I said, I'm just going to keep going. It's now 14 years, you know, 14 years since I made that decision. It's really become just my lifestyle. And it's been life-changing. As cliche as that sounds, that's truly how it's been. You know, when I look at everything that's transpired in the last 14 years, and it was a direct result of that fateful decision to answer my wife's question and become the man that I would want my daughters to marry.
Dang,
You know?
that is powerful,
Yeah.
right there, man. That's just the power of making a decision, right? It all started with you making that decision that I'm gonna do this. I mean, there's tactical stuff that went along with it, but it all started with that decision, right? There's so much power in decision. So that's amazing. So how long have you guys been married now?
We've been happily dating for 23 years. You know, I've been dating my wife, and I'll forever be dating my wife. And yeah, I use that term very, very intentionally because I'll tell you, 23 years ago and to where we are now, we're very different people. And if we weren't actively dating and continuously dating one another, we would never be able to fall in love with the new versions of ourselves every day. You know, so I encourage people in long-term relationships, never stop dating. You know, your spouse, it's awesome. It really is.
Well, so you guys got married early, right? So you guys are completely different people now, I'm sure.
Oh gosh, completely. You know, she was in her early 20s. I was mid 20s. You know, we started having kids within a few years of meeting each other. Like it just, we did everything really fast, you know, and we sort of learned as we went. And there was some awesome stuff that came with that, but there was also some challenges that came with that, you know. So, but it was all good. It was our life, you know.
Yeah. So what's some dating ideas for people out there that maybe like maybe I should take my wife on a date? What do you guys like?
Good. Well, the first thing I recommend is just put it in the calendar and make it recurring. So it's the same time and same day every week. So we know that Saturday night is our date night, you know, from 5 p.m. till 11 p.m. You know, we got this block of time and it's always blacked out on our calendars, her calendar and my calendar. And we like to switch it up where alternate weeks, I'll decide what we do with that block of time. And then the next week, she'll decide what we do with that block of time. And so we get to sort of mix up what we want to do and what we think might be fun. And sometimes it might just be staying at home, making dinner and Netflix and chilling, you know, like I'm not saying like we have to go out and do stuff, but it's intentional time for us to connect and just be with one another. And we just know it's that non-negotiable one night a week. I mean, our friends now know if they ask us to do something on Saturday night, they've got to factor in, it's got to be both of us and it's got to be factored in to complement the date night. Or they won't ask us, they won't call us to do anything on Saturday night. Like that's how long and how consistent, but also how good we are just constantly telling people, no, we'll get invited. No, it's date night. Sorry, Christine, I got a plan. You know, we got something going on, you know, like, so that's the first thing I recommend is put it in the calendar, you and your partner commit to that, you stick with it and you make it a non-negotiable. After that, maybe switch it up. So you take turns planning what you're going to do with that. You know, sometimes for us, we just go for a walk. We'll grab a coffee, go for a nice walk. Living in Vancouver is really nice. We have something called the Seawall. So it goes all around the city down to a big park called Stanley Park. and you could just watch the waves and just people watch and walk and connect and sit and just enjoy the outdoors, you know. For us, we might do that for a couple hours, grab a bite to eat, go home, maybe snuggle up, watch a movie, maybe do some naked tango under the sheets, but you know, like which usually, yeah, but you know, we're creating space to be intimate and connect on a deeper level. And because during the week, especially when you got young kids or kids that are growing, you got a big career, demanding career, like it's tough to create the space to just be completely present for one another. And so that's why that one intentional night a week has been so good for us, you know.
Wow.
So that's just a couple ideas, but I don't want to be so prescriptive to say, do this, do this, do this. You know, find stuff that's fun, do stuff that's different, and don't be afraid of even just creating a night where you just chill at home, make some homemade pizzas, watch some movies, and just enjoy each other's company. Escape rooms are a lot of fun too, by the way. I just throw that out there. They can either destroy your relationship or make it stronger. It's one or the other.
Yeah.
But they're fun. Or just going and doing drop-ins at a gym. You know, like we'll go to the rock climbing gym as an example, or you know, we'll maybe go to a CrossFit class or a spin class or yoga class, right? Like just making it a healthy date, right? Doing something that's physical to start with and then having some fun afterwards, right? So anyways, those are just a few ideas, but I just tell people just go, just do it, you know, and see what happens.
That's it. Yeah, and being intentional and making it a priority. Those are two huge keywords you use right there. Just and then after that, it really doesn't matter what you do, right? If you're just being intentional about it and making it a priority, just being with each other, right? So, man, I think too many people get caught up in the schedule, like you said. So we all have busy lives, and you can kind of get on that autopilot. So, so you've kind of got a theme throughout your life of, you know, being intentional, sticking with those priorities, and being consistent. That's a big thing with you. I mean, you were going to go 1 year, and then now you're on year 15, no alcohol. So that's amazing.
Yep.
It all started with that one decision. So
one question, man. I got to give it to my wife. You know, she helped me with that. Like, had she not asked me that question, I still think I probably would have come to a similar conclusion. But I don't think, to be honest, it's really interesting. I often think, like, what happened if she didn't ask me that question at that moment in time?
Yeah.
You know, would I have come to the realization to make a commitment to move away from it, to say no to that so I could say yes to everything else? And at times, you know, it's easy to get caught up in that and start thinking about all the maybes and what ifs, but I just have to be grateful that I made the decision that I did, you know, and followed the path that I followed. And there's no regret there, right? Like there's no regret. It's just like, no. And I don't regret how I was before that. That's still who I am and who I was, you know, like, I'm not denying that. But I've evolved. And I think that's what we're all looking to do, right? Is just become better versions of ourselves, better versions where we can look in the mirror and say, you know what? I like you, you know, like give me a virtual high five to myself here, you know, like that's a wonderful place to find oneself. And I'm not talking about being arrogant or overtly confident. I'm talking about just liking who you are as a person.
Man, that's where it all starts. And if you could start there. Yeah, that is
it's huge. It's huge, you know?
So maybe not everyone has like that lightning bolt type question in their life. But if there's someone out there struggling right now and they want to change their life, where do you recommend they start? Where do you turn to? How do you change your life when you're in rock bottom?
Well, I think first and foremost, there's 3 questions that everybody should ask themselves. You know, first of all, can I do it? If I do it, will it work? And is it worth it? And what I'm referring to are typically the changes that we've identified. Because for any situation to change, you got to change. You know, you got to do things differently than you were doing it before, right? And it does take action. You can't just talk about it. You can't just write about it. You can't just think about it. You got to do stuff. You know, you got to actually purposely and intentionally do certain actions to create the new result. And I guess, you know, what I like to say about this whole thing is those 3 questions, like me as a kid at 15 years old, you know, can I lose this weight? Can I actually get healthy? That's what I wanted. That was the change I identified I wanted. I want to get healthy. Wasn't exactly sure what that meant, but I wanted to get healthy. I wanted to be different than how I was feeling. So can I get healthy? And I started thinking about it. You know, I started rattling my brain. Like, can I get healthy? Can I, at this 15-year-old boy that's morbidly obese, actually get healthy and fit? And I started to think that I don't know. There's way more that I don't know than I know. And so it brings up this big question around education and self-education, knowledge, right? Which hopefully we apply and it becomes wisdom, internal wisdom, right? And for me, it was like, I realized I just didn't know enough. I didn't know how to start to navigate the changes. So can I do this? Yeah, I think I'm capable of it. But if I learn the steps, or I find a process or a blueprint, a map, an example of others that have done it, yeah, I can do this. I can get healthy. Because you have to come to an answer that's positive on that very first question. Like, you have to get to a place where you say, yes, I can change. I can do this. Because then you got to follow it up with question 2. All right, well, if I do this, will it actually work? So if I start, moving my body with a little bit of purpose every day, purpose to create, a physical adaptation, right? Like this physiological response where my body wants to get a little healthier, meaning that I improve my cardiovascular system. I improve my strength, my endurance. You can look at all these different performance markers, but at the end of the day, I'm moving my body with the intention of getting healthier. If I do that, will it actually create the results? Will I get healthier? Because if we don't believe that to be true, or that we can do it, we're not going to be able to sustain the commitment, nor take the actions consistently, because we'll give up before we started, right? Like we will. It's just, it's in human nature as well. Because listen, we are lazy, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's called conservation of energy. It's in our DNA. We want to do as little as possible to create the best result. Nothing wrong with that. It's also why, drugs like Ozempic are selling like hotcakes, right? So, well, you mean I can take a little pill or an injection and lose weight? Thank you. Give it to me. It's like, anyway, don't get me started. But, because that second question, if I do this, will it work? When we get to a place of a yes on that, it increases our confidence. It increases our confidence in what actions to take, but also it will diminish how much we procrastinate. That's the key. It's those distractions and those sort of our normal way of dealing with stress, and that will override any changes we're trying to make if we allow it to, until the new lifestyle, the new actions become our new normal. But that takes consistency and frequency and commitment, discipline even, and just trusting that if I do this, it will work. Fortunately for me at that time, there was magazines, there was books I got at the library that had wonderful stories and testimonials of other people that had made similar changes. And that's the wonderful thing about the internet today, is we can find examples of people that have already done the things that we want to do. Well, if they can do it, man, I can do it too.
That's it.
So first question, can I do it? Yes. If I do it, will it work? Yes. Now you got to ask question 3. Is it worth it? Is getting healthy worth it as a 15-year-old kid? And really, when I'm talking to groups or teams, it makes sense to use a term like it. But when we're talking about ourselves and being in, our own individual lives, we have to phrase the question, am I worth it? That's not an easy one to answer, because that can unravel a whole pile of yuck.
For sure.
And stuff that we have to sort through. And I'm not saying skip over the question. You want to acknowledge it, you want to sit with it, but it may not be 100% clear at the beginning, meaning that you might not truly believe it yet. I'll tell you, as that 15-year-old boy, every time I looked in the mirror, I was disgusted by who I was looking at. I found a complete disconnect. I didn't want to accept that that's actually who I was. And so, am I worth it? Well, back then, to be honest, as a 15-year-old kid that was hurting in all ways possible, I probably would have said, no, I'm not worth it, because I didn't have that self-belief. I didn't have the self-love or the self-care enough to say yes to that. And this is where there's a part 4 or 3B. It's like, who do I need to get around that can help me with this? Because what I find is if we don't have that self-belief or self-love enough to say, yeah, I'm worth it right now, get around a group of people that are already on a similar journey with similar beliefs that you yourself want to adopt. They're going to look at you and say, dude, you're worth it. I'm only a few steps ahead of you, but I'll tell you, I felt the exact same way as you are right now, but look at where I am now. And that's because XYZ, 1, 2, 3. And we're here to help you with that too. And so even if you can't answer, am I worth it? And own that, find a group of like-minded individuals to support you until you believe it. Because they're going to drip into you, you know, they're going to drip into you. They're going to help you get confident. They're going to help you get clear on what you need to do. And they're also going to hold you accountable. And that accountability is a big reason why we're able to sustain often the things that we commit to doing, you know? So that's how I recommend everybody start any journey towards change, is answering those 3 questions. And then you just got to get to work, you know, just get to work. You know?
Wow. That's a powerful system right there. I mean, you kind of need that framework. That's what you need. And it does start. And you got to start with the belief that I can do this. When it starts there, everything kind of can fall into place. And hey, if you're listening right now, guess what? You are worth it, by the way.
Yeah.
Putting that out. We've never even met you. And we know this. We're professionals. We know
Hell yeah.
Man, this has been awesome. Thank you so much for coming on here. I know we've chalked up a few more on the million. I don't know how many we'll put into your category on that. But you changed today. So what's the best place for people to connect with you?
Well, you know, I'm on social media. I'm very active on LinkedIn and Instagram. Okay. So I always say that's the best place for us to start connecting, have a conversation, and just start to get to know one another. You know, like I love hearing from people and hear about what big changes they're working on right now. You know, I love hearing about those stories and what's working for people, where they're struggling, because I like to help. You know, and so those are the 2 channels I would recommend connecting with me on. And if you're just looking for lots of information about a lot of the things that we've been talking about today, and I mean, the knowledge piece, right? That knowledge into wisdom, we got to learn the stuff. Then when you apply it, you realize, wow, awesome, I did this. That's where your self-confidence goes up. I've got a blog that I've been blogging on since 2008.
Oh, wow.
There's a lot of content there. I'm not going to apologize for it. It's there to help people. And I recommend, if you go to diamondwell.com, you'll find it. And there's a lot of content there geared around everything we talked about today, Joe. So, and it's free, it's accessible. Just dive into that. And then outside of that, just Diamond Well on any social platform, but Instagram and LinkedIn would be the best one if you want to connect with me directly.
Okay, cool. And I'll link that in show notes, because I know you're like, y'all don't know how to spell his name. You've never met him. It's
I know, right?
D-A-I, by the way. Is that a Welsh name, by the way? Where's that?
Yes, you're absolutely right. It's Welsh for David. Welsh for
cool.
David, or Daffod, if you look up the Welsh spelling. But Di's the pet form. It's like Richard and Dick, right? Or Bob and Robert. Same sort of idea. In Wales, Daffod would be shortened to Di.
Oh, cool. I've never met a Di. That's cool. So it's not D-I-E, by the way. That's a different guy out there.
Yeah, that's right. But hey, don't worry. You know, if you spell it like that, I think it's almost to the place now where Google will auto-correct you. It's been searched for enough now. So I hope. But if it doesn't, I'll still show up, because I've made sure to SEO it for all the misspellings.
See, you're playing chess. Everyone else playing checkers out there. So yeah. Now, this is great. You definitely changed some lives. If you're listening right now, please share this with somebody. He brought so many nuggets of wisdom that can help you in so many ways, or somebody that you might know. So please share that with them. Hey, I'm going to link everything in show notes where you can connect with him. Hey, you felt his energy, his passion for helping people. You need some more in that life, in your life, right? And that's what he does every day. Gets up every morning and helps someone else. So connect with him on those social media platforms. Go to his blog. I've checked it out. There is tons of information, and there's something that can help you. So please check that out. And Di, thank you so much for what you're doing out there in the world. Keep dating your wife. Keep doing out there and changing lives. And we're going to get you in that million. I don't know how you count those, but we're going to get it.
It's just good vibes all around. That's all that matters. And
that's what
and Joe, just I want to acknowledge you real quickly, just because I know there's a lot of people out there that are probably going to think and feel the exact same thing I'm about to say, but it needs to be said. And it's thank you, for creating this platform to capture these conversations. So all of us out there can be flies on the wall to pick up on the wisdom that's being cultivated every single time you show up and do this. And I just got to acknowledge it, because I know it takes a lot of time, energy, and resources to continuously put out what you're putting out. And I just want to say thank you, man. Like, really, thank you for doing this. Because as you said earlier, when we first started jamming, and I asked you about sort of why did you get started doing this? I mean, you identified what we all feel is that there's so much negative in the world. We got to do our part to offset that. The debits and the credits, right?
That's it, yeah.
And thank you for way offsetting the negative with all the positive you're throwing down. So it was an honor to be here today. Thank you so much. And I hope we get to talk again soon.
Absolutely, man. I would love that. So, hey, if you're listening right now, thank you so much for tuning in. Please share this episode to keep growing every week. So we appreciate the help. So keep that up, and we'll see you on the Relentless Positivity podcast next week.